Hello, everyone. Welcome to Triangle Be Well TV, Tribe of Well. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson. I'm in the studio with the esteemed Amnon Nisan.
Do I have to have steam coming out of my ears now?
Ah, you've been esteemed. You haven't been fried. Don't be fried.
Hello.
Hey,
Long time.
yeah, you're like my Milton Boyle.
Nothing boil.
Boyle. So,
Okay.
so today, a lot of people I know who have podcasts and vlogs and TV shows have sponsors, and I don't have a sponsor, but today I have a sponsor. Today's show is sponsored by this hat, which is brought to me by my daughter. Yael, thank you very much. I appreciate it. She knitted it just for me. And since I'm colorblind, I don't exactly know, but I've been told that there's no blue in it.
Yael.
Yael. Yael Zivan.
Yael.
Yael Zivan.
Yeah.
So there it is. And apparently it's got swirlies on top.
Swir-
And it keeps me very warm. So here I am under the hot studio light. So I'll probably rip it off pretty soon. But if you would like a hat made by Elzivan, you could write to me, hj@plantyourself.com, and measure your head and tell us what you want. And she's probably too busy, actually. So I don't even know why she is my sponsor of the day. But there you go. You know, I do get kind of envious when I hear people like, all these podcasters like have deals with Casper mattresses or what's that the web hosting that people are using, the Squarespace,
Yeah.
or Harry's razors. Like there's just a few that MailChimp that everybody uses. I kind of want my own sponsors, but I don't want
Oh.
I don't want everybody else's. So I don't know. Well, of course we have truck nuts.
We have what?
Truck nuts.
Truck nut. Oh, yeah. Oh, you do? You got them?
No, but someday they'll send me a check. I just know it. So what I want to talk about today. So my daughter's knitted hats and truck nuts. Go out there and support our sponsors. I wanted to talk about today was I just got back from a kick-ass conference, Wellness Forum Health 20th anniversary concert. Concert? How many times have I said concert? Conference. Which reminds me of music. I have not yet thanked the composer of the music for this show. His name is Will Ridenauer, and that's Ride, Ridenour. And he's got a website, willridenauer.com. He's a kora player. That instrument you hear being played, da 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 da, is a kora, which kind of looks like a banjo with a tumor. So it's like this really big bulbous thing at the bottom, and then all these strings, and it's really, really big, and you play it like this, and there's no, as far as I can tell, there's no fingerings. In other words, the strings are just the strings like a harp, as opposed to a guitar or a violin or a fretted instrument where you're changing the pitch of the string with one hand. This is like both hands plucking and needing to know exactly where to pluck. We've been to several of his concerts. My son has made a little documentary about him and his music, and he graciously let me use this piece called Sabali Dawn, Dance of Love, as the theme music for this work. So thank you, Will. And if you want more of his music, you can find him on, I believe, Spotify, willridenauer.com, and he also plays with lots of local groups here in the Triangle, including the breakaway Senegalese hit group Kairaba. So thank you, Will. It's getting hot in here. People, get ready for my balding.
Oh, let me turn down the light.
My bald pate. Yeah, now we just blew some bulbs there from the reflection. So this show is also brought to you by water. Drink some today. So the Wellness Forum Health 20th Anniversary Conference featured a number of really, really interesting speakers. And in the airport, I was inspired to buy a Moleskine notebook. This show is also brought to you by Moleskine. What the hell? It's a nice notebook. And I also got some colored markers, and I took really psychedelic notes. So just proud of those. So those are some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you today. So the first, where are we? Here we are. This was a book, and this is the first speaker is Neil Barnard, who is the founder and I believe, I don't know, president or CEO or whatever of PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He also has opened up the Barnard Clinic, which is shockingly a medical clinic, a medical practice that practices the way you'd want your doctor to practice if they actually were trying to help you get well and not just manage your disease with drugs and surgeries. And that's, I believe, somewhere in the Washington, D.C. area. The PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, has done tremendous work over the years, including advocacy around removing tests on animals or laboratory experiments on animals for medical schools. And there's lots of reasons for this, aside from that it's just effing rude to do this stuff to animals. I mean, to treat living beings like they're just our property to do whatever we want with them. I have this fantasy every so often of just like, the aliens landing on Earth and going, oh, look, this bipedal species, they're similar to us. They don't have the big eyes and the long pointy head, but otherwise they're kind of similar. So let's do experiments on them and, see what we can learn. I don't think we'd like it. And I'm pretty sure the animals don't like it either. I was listening to the radio earlier this week, and there was a story about this new potential breakthrough for people with who are paraplegic, who have had spinal cord injuries that have sort of severed the communication between the brain and the legs. Now, I think that's fantastic that we can maybe give people sensation back, motion, control, from continence to the ability to move. And they, so I'm very interested in this. And they're describing the experimental treatments which were done on rhesus monkeys, who first the experimenters cut their spinal cords, and then they implanted these. I said, what the, like, did we have to do that? We just like took these rhesus monkeys and just like cut their spinal cords? Like, that just seems rude. Like your mother didn't bring you up to act like that. So PCRM has been in the forefront of removing this kind of animal experimentation for medical schools. They've also done a lot of really good primary research, clinical controlled trials, randomized clinical controlled trials on randomized controlled clinical trials, RCCTs, on things like diabetes, on diet and dementia. And they get really, really good data because they know they're under a microscope because they're perceived as a sort of activist, vegan, animal rights organization. So they know they're not really being taken that seriously. So their work has to be top-notch, above board, really tight protocols. And they do this work. They've done famously work about diabetes, comparing the American Diabetes Association diet, the standard of care for diet, with a whole food, plant-based diet, in their case, I believe, fully vegan. And just in 6 weeks, they can get 24 out of 25 diabetics off of all their insulin. And the American Diabetes Association diet just sort of maintains it, and over time, the doses keep increasing. So they're a great research organization. They also have wonderful classes. They train instructors to teach a class called Food for Life, so they go into communities. So that's Neil Barnard. He's also quite a good rock guitarist, by the way, which I learned at the end of this talk. So his talk was Breaking the Cheese Addiction. He starts out by asking us, what do you think is, according to surveys, is the most addictive food that by Americans? So this is like potato chips are right up there. Chips are right up there. Cookies are right up there. Number one,
Popcorn.
starts with a P.
Popcorn.
Okay, had it been popcorn, I would have said yes. so clearly we're having communication issues in the studio today. If I say one more guess and you say popcorn again. If you have a guest, you can call in at 919-518-9773 or Computers 2K Voice on Skype. And no, the answer is not popcorn, but it does start with a P. And I'll give you a hint. The name of the talk was Breaking the Cheese Addiction. Pizza.
Oh, okay.
Pizza was, yeah, the P is silent, right? Pizza.
Pizza.
You're forgiven. Anyone could have made that mistake. So pizza was the number one food, and it's not because
Not chicken Alfredo. right?
no, Alfredo not. Pizza was number one, not
Wow.
probably because of the tomato sauce or because of the bread, but it's the cheese. Like if you ever see the pictures, like the photographs from pizza restaurants, like right, the cheese, the slices coming off the cheeses. So Neil Barnard goes like, help me understand this. The cheese is the most addictive food, and like it smells like dirty socks. Like object.
Some cheeses will say thank you if you could say that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, that's quite a compliment.
Yeah.
No one's ever said something that nice about me before. Yeah, dirty socks is cool. So what's the deal with cheese? So first of all, he goes over, and I'm just gonna it's a great hour-long presentation. I asked him on the way out, so he was rushing to catch his flight for the next thing he's doing. Is this presentation online anywhere? Because it was not filmed at Wellness Forum. He said, no, it's there might be something. He gave a talk at VegSource. So if you go to YouTube and you type in VegSource, one word, VEGSOURCE, Neil, Neal, Barnard, Barnard, cheese, maybe it's up, maybe you'll find it. But I'll just give you, so he says, like, first of all, let's be clear that cheese is not a health food. Let's be really clear about that. So it says it has zero fiber. It is mostly fat. So if you look at like the fat content of foods, like a prime rib of beef, like 42% fat, chicken with the skin, 30% fat. Like these are
Up there.
up there. What do you think the average percentage of fat in cheese is?
70?
Bingo!
Hey!
Right there, 70% fat. Those aren't
Wow.
snap glasses, are they? You're not like
No.
okay. So 70% fat. He says like first like there's Coke Zero, right? You can get soft drinks. What have you got there? 0-calorie soft drink, Zevia, right, with stevia.
Yeah.
So you can have Coke Zero. He says there's no such thing as cheese zero. There's no such thing as no fat cheese. Cheese is basically fat. So all this fat, and then he had a couple of really interesting graphs. Like, right, we know that Americans are having this obesity epidemic, right? And so you look at it from like the 1970s to today, the graph goes like this: percentage of Americans who are significantly overweight or obese. And then he says, well, what's it blamed on? They say, well, we all went low fat, right? Remember in the 70s, McGovern, Ansel Keys, we all went low fat, and it didn't work because carbs make us fat. So we're having these like low fat cookies and low fat meat and taking the skin off the chicken and the low fat cuts of meat and this and that, and we all went low fat and we still gained weight. He says, well, that's not what happened. So if you look at soda consumption over the past 20 years, it's kind of stayed the same.
Really?
The amount of sugar calories. I mean, people were drinking lots of Coke in the 60s and the 70s. It hasn't, and in fact, it's dropped a bit because of the bottled water industry. Like if you think about what people drank as soft drinks, so it's been level.
Okay.
So we have this level playing field for Coke. We have this giant ramp up for obesity. What else really ramps up? What other food ramps up? Cheese. So like your ancestors, had they been American, 50 years ago, you would have had about like 3 pounds of cheese per person per year. It says now it's like north of 50. Like we have become cheese addicts. Like if you think about like when you were a kid, how many different kinds of cheese were there?
Not many, but we ate a lot of cheese. And we weren't fat.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering now.
Well, it wasn't really a lot compared to
Okay.
right.
Yeah,
So
true,
you grew up
true.
in Israel. You'd have some
Yeah.
local kibbutz would have their spread. You'd
Right.
put a little bit on here.
And
You
maybe a sandwich. That, yeah, no, it's not much. I mean, it's not like a pizza. No way, not nowhere near.
right. So and he talks about this later on. Like the U.S. government is colluding with businesses to move cheese. So they're in cahoots with the dairy industry to get companies to use as much cheese as possible. So for example, and there's a branch of government that is designed to trigger and enhance cheese cravings. He showed us slides from year 2000 task force where the government is going, how can we trigger and enhance cheese cravings? So they were the government responsible for Wendy's Cheddar Lovers Bacon Cheeseburger. They got cheese into the Burger King menu. They added like huge amounts of cheese to Subway, Taco Bell. So the burritos where they're adding all this cheese, and um, for a Pizza Hut pizza that had a pound of cheese per serving.
Wow.
So they stuffed that shit everywhere they could, in the crust,
And
under the crust.
this is enhancement that they add to the cheese in order to make you crave it.
Well, no, it's the cheese is already the cheese. I'll talk about the cravings
Okay.
within cheese.
All right.
So this is just regular
Okay,
cheese,
regular cheese.
but the more you have, the more you crave. Right? There's drugs that you do not crave, even though they're the most highly addictive. There you guys are. Where'd you go? There are drugs that you may crave. You don't crave. You've never had them before, even though they're highly addictive. Because you've never had them, you don't crave them. With anything, the more you have it and the more frequently you have it, the greater the craving. So to enhance and trigger the cravings, you do a few things. You get people having more of it more of the time, and you have it in front of them. So if you've ever had a pizza and then you see the commercial of the pizza, or or you're in the mall and you can smell the pizza coming out of the vent, that triggers and enhances cravings.
Hmm.
So
No, the reason why I said is because a friend of mine who works at State gave us years ago a bag with powder that they were adding to hamburgers to make you like them better. But it was
Right.
an added
right.
ingredient.
So here's why that's not necessary here. There are many substances in the world that are addictive.
Okay.
There are many substances in the world that are fattening. There is only one substance in the world that is both fattening and addictive, and that's cheese.
Wow.
And this is the substance that Neil Barnard says we're feeding to 4-year-olds.
Yeah.
Fattening and addictive. So why is it addictive? Oh, and the other thing about cheese that is so bad is the sodium content. And because sodium increases our weight, just because it's going to give us high blood pressure. So to cut the amount of sodium in our blood, we retain water. So how much sodium do you think is in 2 ounces of Velveeta, like that?
I don't know, 300-400.
830 milligrams in 2 ounces.
And what's the daily? Is there such thing?
Yeah, it depends who you ask. It's between 1,500 and 2,000. So 2 ounces of Velveeta, which is
It's
probably enough to
already-
put on a frigging Ritz cracker,
Right.
is half of your sodium dose
Boy.
for. So you can see why this is kind of
It's bad.
a dangerous substance. So why is it addictive? Well, first of all, the salt is addictive. It adds flavor. Secondly, the fat, right? So human beings evolved in conditions of great scarcity. So anytime you could get a fat calorie, it's a bonanza because fat calorie, a gram of fat has 9 calories. A gram of carbohydrate or protein has only 4 calories. So fat is more than twice as calorically dense as any other food, with the exception of alcohol, which is a beverage, not a food. So we're primed to go for fatty things to go for things with lots of calories. But the third thing is, and here's the stuff that blows me away, is there are substances in cheese, chemicals in cheese called casomorphins. Caso from like queso, meaning cheese, and morphin as in like morphine, as in an opiate. And these casomorphins in cheese pass through the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier is a membrane that separates the brain from the rest of the body. So only so sort of oxygenated blood full of glucose can go into the brain, because the brain gets damaged very easily, right? Like you have different things in your garage than you have in your workshop where you keep all your computers and the servers and all that, right? You have that stuff is fragile, right? So our brain is fragile, right? We want to keep it clean and safe. So we try to avoid having toxic chemicals get into the brain. One of the reasons that psychiatric drugs are so dangerous is that they're they're designed to pass the blood-brain barrier, which is why they can do all their damage inside our brain. Casomorphins in cheese also pass that blood-brain barrier. And I think, like, why on earth would nature have given cheese mind-altering chemicals? And he says, well, think about it. Think about the survival of the species. It depends upon one thing. It depends on lots of things, but there's one weak link in the chain, which is the baby's got to nurse. If the baby doesn't nurse, the baby doesn't thrive, the baby dies, the human race dies out. So nature needed a foolproof way to get babies to start nursing and to like it. So it gave them a suck reflex, right? You touch the baby, infant, newborn. So it's gonna catch the nipple and it's gonna suck. But once it's in there, the suck reflex doesn't. If you stick your finger in a baby's mouth, the suck reflex doesn't keep going off. It does what?
And it
then it might gum you. It might lose interest. So they need it. So once you get that first hit, how are you going to get the baby to keep sucking? The answer is you make it addictive. So nature delivers a dose of feel-good, happy, blissed out with every drop of mother's milk. So, and that's the biological basis, according to Neil Barnard, of mother-baby bonding, is this basically, oh, look how sweet.
Pusher and the...
Look how sweet. The pusher and the user.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, of course the baby looks happy. You just drugged the kid. Right? So the baby nurses, gets this blissed look at it, and goes to sleep. So think of what cheese is. How much milk do you need to make cheese?
A lot.
A lot. You've seen it. Giant vats of milk. So what you're doing is you're concentrating those drugs in up to 100 times their natural normal concentration. So a dosage of 1 is enough to drug your baby. A dosage of 100 is enough to knock out the strongest human being. And we're like, oh God, we're right back in the womb. We're right back nursing at mommy's breast, getting all these sort of chilled out, blissed out pleasure feelings, this pain reduction, lack of worry. It's like, bliss on a pizza. And so that is the main reason he says that this is highly addictive.
And you don't need to smoke it.
Right. You don't need to smoke it. It's not illegal. The government is trying desperately to increase the amount that we're using all the time. He says, so one piece of evidence he gives about how fattening cheese is, aside from like this chart is correlative. It doesn't necessarily prove it, but he says, let's look at the Adventists. The Adventist Health Study 2. The Adventists are this group in California, Seventh-day Adventists, who are really largely very much into health. A lot of them are vegan, a lot of them are vegetarian. Even those who are not vegan or vegetarian, the meat eaters may only just have fish, or they may just have red meat once a month. So there's a real continuum, but they tend to be on the very, very clean side. So Seventh-day Adventists live 10 years longer than the average American. They're the longest lived community in the entire world.
I always thought when I heard Seventh Day Adventist, I thought that was a religious thing.
It is.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's why they get to do it, right? So
Okay.
if Orthodox Judaism had rules about saturated fat, then you get a bunch of people following them. They'll wear the head, they'll follow the rules if they think like that's why I don't want to be a health educator. I want to be a cult leader. Like it's much easier to get people to follow the law when they think damnation is involved. So
Interesting.
so he said there was in the Adventist health studies they looked at people based on their diets, and they found that pescatarian, so that low frequency meat eaters had lower BMIs, body mass index, a measure of overweight, had lower body mass index than heavy meat eaters. Pescatarians, people who ate fish, cheese, eggs, stuff like that, had a lower body mass than the meat eaters. Vegetarians who did lacto-ovo vegetarians who have dairy and eggs had a lower body mass index than the pescatarians, and vegans had a lower body mass index than the vegetarians. And the difference, if you look at the chart, the difference between the vegans and the vegetarians was much greater than the difference than any of the other differences. So cutting out the dairy and the eggs made the biggest difference. It was about 2 points, 2 BMI points. So like 22 or 24, 23 or 25, which is about 15 pounds. So that is some more direct evidence about the link between cheese and obesity. So the other thing he talked about was the dairy industry. So I think most people who are in the know who think about it realize that factory farms are a very terrible way to, first of all, to treat animals, but second of all, to treat ourselves. Like if you had to go to a specialist for brain surgery, you probably wouldn't go, who's the cheapest guy in the country? Right? If you were going to buy a new car, you probably wouldn't go, what is the absolute cheapest car out there? Do they still make Yugos? Can I get like a Daihatsu from some third world country? Like, if you can afford it, you want quality. And so, yeah, we live in this country of great wealth, of course, very poorly distributed, but there's great wealth. But everyone's like, well, food's too expensive. So we want the cheapest possible food. I was listening to a lot of Leonard Cohen.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. In the last few days. And one of the things I hadn't gotten to, he had a new album that was released like 2 weeks ago, a month ago, called You Want It Darker. So I was listening to some of the songs from You Want It Darker. And I think the song is On the Level. I'm not positive. I can't remember the name of the song, but there was a line. So there's a line in the Battle Hymn of the Republic where he died to make men holy, talking about the religious, the Christian underpinnings of American culture and why we are going through this battle against slavery. He died to make us holy. So Leonard Cohen repeats that line. He says, he died to make men holy. Let us die to make things cheap. That stopped me.
Ooh.
Right. You think about like Walmart, like, Apple iPhone workers committing suicide in their factories, having netting over the windows. Think about how many wars are fought over oil just so we can have cheap electricity. Right. So factory farms make our calories cheap. But we understand that. He says, but suppose like you've got this bucolic farm. Near me, you drive down the road, you see cows on the road, not on the road, but next to the road. They look very happy. They're chewing peacefully. So like, what's the problem with getting milk from one of those cows? So we'll just think about it.
Depends what they eat, right?
Well, let's say they're eating, grass and they're getting massages from Japanese shiatsu masters.
All right.
So and there's no hormones being given to the cows, no antibiotics, perfectly natural. Now let's think about it. So cows are mammals, just like human beings, right? So how many women do you know walking around lactating if they don't need to? Like women are not walking around with like giant stains on the front of their shirt. Lactation.
Some do.
Lactation is for people for pregnant women for women who are, pregnant and nursing.
Right.
So if you want your cow to be economically viable, if you're not just doing this out of the goodness of your heart, but you're trying to make money, you need your cow to be pregnant pretty much all the time. So the first thing is we're going to take your cow and we're going to artificially inseminate it, which if it were a person would be called rape. So we're taking the cow, and there's pictures of how you do it, and one hand goes in here and pulls this out through the rectum, the other one goes through the vaginal opening, and you sort of you shoot the syringe, and so this is not consensual. So you're going to do that, and then the cow's going to have a baby, and the problem with baby cows is they drink milk. And we can't have that because that milk is for us. So we take the baby cow away from its mother. And Neil Barnard shared this story from a newspaper about the residents of this town were being freaked out by these sounds that sounded like they were, coming from outer space or aliens, these weird, horrible, very plaintive sounds. And so then someone said, wrote in the newspaper, this is nothing to worry about. This just happens every time of year when the calves are being taken away from their mothers. The mothers are just mourning the loss of their calves. And everyone's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what is cool about that? Like, these are mothers and babies. And so the babies are being taken away. If they're girls, within a year, they're gonna be hooked up next to their mother to be milked. Cows could live like 15 to 20 years, right? I mean, bigger animals tend to live longer. Cows' natural lifespan 15 to 20 years. The average dairy cow lives about 4, because once they've outlived their usefulness as a dairy cow, they don't go to pasture to be happy for the rest of their lives. They get turned into
steaks.
Well, hamburger or dog food. I mean, they're not top quality meat at this point. The male calves are taken away and put in little crates not to move so they can be sold as veal, or if they are lucky enough, like one in however many million will become a bull, because you don't need that many bulls, because you don't need bulls riding around, because you have veterinarians and syringes. So like that's what you're contributing to when you're doing dairy. So let's say you're a complete sociopath and you really don't give a shit about animal suffering, and like you wouldn't you torture cats and dogs, because like what's the difference? Here's why you should still care about this, because the amount of sex hormones in that milk is off the charts. The estrogens, the progesterones, the female sex hormones in cow's milk are astronomical. So in women, this leads to all the hormonally based cancers: breast cancer, uterine cancer.
And is this because of the way that they are producing the milk, or is that just, even if there was 200 years ago dairy farm, that everything is happening in a natural way?
Right. It's because it's the amounts.
Okay.
Again. So if you had a dairy farm and you had one cow, it would have a calf. You wouldn't take that calf away.
Right.
That calf would then grow to be the next cow. So you would sort of take a little bit off the top. Right. The most important thing was keeping the lineage alive.
So that little bit, sharing it with the calf, whatever it doesn't, is okay compared to what they're doing when they take.
Yeah,
okay.
most things are dose response.
Okay.
Right. So if I sort of pat you on the cheek versus I punch you with the steel knuckles,
okay.
So good.
So all these cancers.
Right. And also, and what about in men? Like we don't have, uteruses, and men tend not to get breast cancer very much. We do, but it's not as nearly as prevalent as in women. Well, there's a lot of evidence that the more dairy we drink, the lower our sperm count, because the female reproductive hormones are acting antagonistically towards the male hormones, the testosterone. We're becoming more feminized, and therefore less able to be virile and reproduce. So, this is what are we to do? It says the main thing is, like, remember all these casomorphins. The main thing they produce in us are these good feelings, which is connected to a single neurotransmitter, dopamine. Right? Dopamine is the pleasure neurochemical, the pleasure neurotransmitter. It's the reward. Like when we do something that feels good, we get a dopamine rush, and we go, oh, this feels good, we should do it some more. So that's why the baby who nurses once gets hooked, because the dopamine comes flooding in. The baby makes the connection between nursing and feeling that good, and so it's going to come back for more. So anything that releases dopamine, and things like chocolate release dopamine, sex releases dopamine. So dopamine really is cascades at high levels at two moments: for food and intimacy, right? Survival and reproduction. Like those are the key moments in humans being able to survive and reproduce as a species. Is we need to really enjoy sex, and we need to really enjoy food. So what are we to do as adults who are not working in the adult film industry and who don't want to eat all the time? How are we going to get our daily hits of dopamine? It says, well, remember, dopamine is about intimacy as well as food. So intimacy means sex, but it doesn't mean exclusively sex. So we get dopamine from things like positive personal interactions. Right. So if you've ever seen porno, the pizza delivery guy.
What a connection!
there's more dopamine to be had by this stud muffin. I've heard.
Oh boy.
Than the pizza itself, right? The pizza ends up on the floor, right?
Uh-huh.
They don't have pornos where they're just sitting there and they're. I don't think. I mean, right? So you get dopamine from personal interactions. You get dopamine from physical activity. So things like, sex with the pizza delivery boy on the dining room table, or yoga, or running, or swimming, or dancing. And you also get dopamine rush, interestingly enough, from music. Isn't that cool? That
Music that you like.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you like any music you listen to enough. Like anyone who grows up with, like, whatever. There's people who like polkas. Did you know that? Right? You grow up listening to it. People can develop tastes. If I say like, I'm feeling like very goth or very metal, like it might take a little while to really get into it. But there's almost nothing you don't listen to, and you start liking. Like, what was it? My daughter was playing me a Beyonce song. She wanted me to watch the video. I think about Lemonade, one of the songs. I don't listen to Beyonce. It's like, this is all right. This is not really my thing. Then she played a few more songs for me, and then she played Lemonade again. And this is the second time I've ever heard the song. I'm like, yeah, I like this one now. And it's because it was becoming familiar, right? There is Jonah Berger, who's a professor at the Wharton School of Economics at University of Pennsylvania, just wrote a book called Invisible Influence. And he talks about the neuroscience of liking the familiar. He says, like, it makes a lot of sense that we like things that are familiar to us because we know they're not going to kill us. Like, you taste a berry and you go, oh, yeah, good berry. I don't get sick from it. I don't die from it. I don't have crazy hallucinations and fall off a cliff. This nourished me. I felt good. So now I like the berry because it saves me brain cycles. I don't have to think so hard. Like, oh, this is a berry. I like this berry. So there's something very, very efficient about liking things that we're familiar with. So Neil Barnard says that music And physical activity and personal interactions are what we need to get into our lives if we are going to break the cheese addiction or any addiction. That these are all, these addictive substances are shortcuts to our brain, but we're not evolved for these shortcuts. Nature never created, nature has not created addictive substances. We created those addictive substances by refining them, by removing the parts that are not addictive, by concentrating them. And cheese is the same as taking coca leaves and making cocaine, or taking very, very lightly fermented, like there's beer in every culture. When we lived in South Africa, we'd go to Zulu ceremonies. They would make beer by sort of fermenting. Traditionally, the women would like chew the grains and spit them out, which would, and then everyone drinks from it because it helps it ferment. But otherwise, like the beer was like really, really low alcoholic, very, very low proof. And people would get drunk anyway because of sort of the cultural expectations of we get drunk. So you can get somebody drunk on water if you tell them it's vodka, if they believe placebo wise that they're going to get drunk. But these substances were not addictive because they were not concentrated in the way that our Western world has the ability to concentrate this kind of potency. So those are not natural ways to get dopamine, but being around your people, dancing, singing. So like the ultimate dopamine rush would be a group of humans around a campfire singing and dancing. Right? And that's what culture has been: storytelling, courtship, all the things that we need to do to have a cohesive culture and to have enough sex to have another generation.
Shucks.
This is what dopamine was meant for people to live happy, connected, loving, intimate lives of mutual support. And instead of that, we got frigging Pizza Hut cheese lovers pizza with pizza with cheese like syringe like popped into the crust, into the dough, on top, on the bottom, in the middle, deep dish, right? And so we're going for it because we've lost the primary sources of.
So next time you order pizza, get it over, pay the guy, go out, throw it in the trash, and jump in bed with the wife or the girlfriend instead.
Right. So pizza. Think of pizza as foreplay. It's just put tomatoes on a frisbee, and then and then go do something social.
Interesting.
So let me see if there's any other bits I want to take away from this talk. That's pretty much it. Neil Barnard has a book coming out in February of 2017 called The Cheese Trap, in which I'm sure this and much more will be in.
And you talked about the fact that dairy in general and cancer.
Right. Dairy is a growth medium. Like the function of dairy is physiological. So psychologically, the function of dairy is to get us addicted so that we will continue to suckle at the breast. Because breastfeeding is not without its problems, right? There's like La Leche League. There's lactation consultants. Like breastfeeding is not a sure thing, right? There's women who have babies and the babies don't take to the breast. It's not 100%. So whenever you have something like that where it's so crucial and it's not 100%, nature is going to stack the deck to try to make this thing work. And the casomorphines appear to be the main way that nature induces this dopamine rush. But everybody's different. It doesn't work all the time. But it's crucial that for evolutionary success, that a species has a way of increasing the odds of babies taking nourishment right away. I think that's about it for that. So the next, we've got another 15 minutes here. So that was a 45-minute introduction to a 60-minute talk, actually. So unlike cheese, I'm not concentrating the information very, very tightly. That wasn't like a 60-second talk.
Well, if you want, I can go in the kitchen. I can get you a couple of slices of cheese so you can actually show how it is.
Yeah, no, let's not cut the cheese in here.
You want some water?
I think I'm all right. I think I'm gonna hang in there. You have any concentrated water? Maybe some like
Yeah,
ice.
but then I'm gonna have to.
Actually, ice is like less concentrated, right? Because of the air.
It expands.
It expands, right? Somebody told me if ice didn't expand, there would be no life on Earth. How cool is that? Because, right, you get the ice at the top of the lake. If it was as dense as water, it would drop to the bottom, and so eventually all bodies of water would be frozen. So,
Interesting.
so thank you, H.O. Bond of 108 degrees for Shehechianu, keeping us alive for this moment. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the next speaker is Peter Breggin. You've heard me talk a lot about Peter Bregman, who is my friend, who is a leader and a coach trainer. This is Peter Breggin. So things just got complicated. Peter Breggin is a psychiatrist. He is 80 years old. And one of the cool things about Peter Breggin is that he has never put a patient on a psychiatric drug. He has prescribed psychiatric drugs to patients for the purpose of weaning them off of them. So if someone comes and they're on psych drugs, it's about as dangerous to take somebody off a psych drug as it is to put them on, but that's where you want to go. So he will prescribe, lower and lower doses while people are under supervision and care and protection to keep, to help them stay alive and manage this very, very difficult withdrawal. But he's never put anyone on drugs. Second thing he's never done is he has never institutionalized a patient against their will, which is really rare for psychiatrists. Psychiatrists, this is one of the great power rackets in the Western world. It's one of those places. This is like our domestic Guantanamo. Like you think like we have due process in America and we just don't put people away for no reason. Psychiatrists can put people away for no reason. And they have the kind of power that's given to them by the courts is terrifying. So this is probably the last time you'll ever hear from me. So Peter Breggin, but if you think this is, courageous, Peter Breggin is a psychiatrist who has been speaking out and writing and testifying against the use of things like electroshock therapy, which he's banned from most places. He is trying to get bans on giving any psychiatric drugs to children, including ADHD meds, which he sees as the gateway,
Stepping stone.
as the cause, not just a stepping stone to other drugs, but as causing the brain damage that then leads people. This is like 50 years ago, there was something known as bipolar disorder. It affected about 1 in 60,000 adults in America. Now, bipolar disorder is less than 1 in 100. Like if you go to the movies and there's 90 other people in the theater, at least one of them is bipolar. And before, like bipolar was like, you'd fly a colleague in to meet your bipolar patient because they'd only read about it in the textbook. So clearly something's happening to our brains, and it's probably not the cheese. As much as we want to blame cheese for everything. So Peter Breggin is talking about psych drugs. He talks about, first of all, like there was a psychiatric revolution in the 1930s, where before this, psychiatrists were basically hotel managers of really horrible institutions, of these sanatoriums where like Bedlam in London, where people were just warehoused, and they would warehouse people who were mentally ill, people who were poor, people who were disruptive, hysterical women. So anyone who's sort of against the status quo but hadn't committed a crime, that were warehoused in these asylums. There were people who had severe psychological issues, and so that it wasn't a therapeutic environment, and psychiatrists weren't trained in being therapists and trained in helping. They were trained in behavior management, because the more docile these people were, the better, the easier your job. So psychiatry began in the 1930s a concerted effort to figure out how to damage people's brains to make them docile, helpless, and confused. So one thing they noticed is that after somebody had a seizure, like an epileptic fit, for example, they were confused, they were helpless, they were docile. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone have an epileptic seizure. The shaking, and I remember the first time I saw this, I was playing tennis, and on our local court, there were two courts next to each other, and there was a couple playing next to us, and they were both very, very good. And suddenly, the husband just started walking repeatedly into the net, and then take a step back and walk into it, and I started laughing because it just seemed. And then the wife came over and kind of took the racket out of his hand very quickly and guided him over, and then he was shaking and convulsing. And then, suddenly, I was, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. It took me a while to process what I was seeing, but clearly there was something medically very wrong. And afterwards, he was like drugged beyond. So very, very docile, helpless, confused. He needed help, like getting up, moving. So, we had to go over and help him. So by 1933, psychiatrists were using stimulants to put people into seizures so they could elicit this docile, helpless, confused behavior. In 1934, it was realized that, if someone gets an overdose of insulin, they can go into a coma. All right? So in 1934, psychiatrists started repeatedly putting patients into insulin comas. And their theory was it kills bad brain cells. And so the people who survived, there was a very high death rate for this procedure, but the people who survived were much more docile, much more helpless, much more confused. And I don't know if you've had that experience of just too much insulin in your body. You get low, and so if you get low enough, you go into coma. When you come out of coma, there's some brain damage. There's a lot of examples of this. Like in 1936, doctors started doing lobotomies, and they literally were like scooping out brains with a spoon. And then there was 400 plus volt electroshock therapy. So these were all seen as like we're helping the patient, we're helping them get rid of their bad brain cells or their bad thoughts. But in fact, they all have the same purpose of making people docile and helpless. And so it says that's exactly what's going on in our classrooms today with Ritalin. So Ritalin helps make people OCD, right? So if you're OCD, it's much easier to copy every word of the homework off the board. It makes you less spontaneous. So you don't talk to the other kids in class. You stop thinking for yourself. You stop exploring. So Ritalin is essentially a way of creating, among our school children, good caged animals who are docile and helpless so that we can manage them. And when you look at studies of how kids on ADHD drugs do, there's no study that shows them doing better academically over more than 3 weeks. So, Adderall XR3, Adderall XR is a powerful stimulant that's used for ADHD. College kids know to go, or high school and college kids know to go to their doctor and fake symptoms of ADHD so they can get prescriptions of Adderall because it's such a powerful stimulant, it'll help them stay awake all night and study and get good grades. So Adderall improves performance academically for 3 weeks. So the randomized controlled clinical trial for Adderall was 3 weeks long because by the 4th week, the brain is fighting back. It's trying to regain its hormonal balance. So the only measures in which these ADHD drugs work is teachers report that students are more, compliant. They do their work more. They are less disruptive in class, just like the people in the asylum in the 19th century. So we're making them less disruptive. The teacher's life is easier, so they no longer have to be interesting. They no longer have to be relevant. They no longer have to relate to children. they can simply prescribe these drugs and just be as crappy as they were before. So there's a lot more. He talks about the introduction of the real psych drugs in 1954 with Thorazine. The side effects of Thorazine include apathy, lethargy, indifference, robotic mental state, feeling isolated, disengaged, and docile. So one of the things that psychiatrists really were talking about, like why Thorazine was such an improvement, they would say it gives the people the indifference of a lobotomy plus sphincter control. So they're lobotomized, but they won't shit themselves, so we don't have to clean them. Like that's exciting. So he says, what psychiatry tries to do is to get rid of human connection and caring. He says that all psychiatric drugs are neurotoxins. They all damage the brain. So if a psychiatrist, if someone comes in and they're suffering from anxiety, or they're suffering from something that you might call, a mental disease like PTSD. Did you know people who suffer? You're in the military. You know people who suffer from PTSD. Peter Breggin refuses to call it PTSD. You know why? Because of the D. He says it's not a disorder. It's the normal human brain response to terribly stressful events. It's not a disorder. There's nothing wrong with you if that's how your brain responds to the horrors of war. That's normal. Like walking away from it whistling, if anything, is abnormal. But suffering flashbacks, feeling guilt, having feelings of anxiety that you aren't able to fully process because you've been disconnected from other people, this is not a disorder. And we should stop treating people like this, like they're disordered. So he gave another talk about how do you do therapy. He says people who are called psychotic basically have lost the ability to trust another human being. And it's basically because other people have lost the right to be called trustworthy. Right? So if you're in a war zone, or if you're in a terribly abusive family or an abusive marriage, it's natural for people to save themselves by withdrawing their trust. I'll end with this metaphor, which I thought was so powerful. So someone comes to the psychiatrist and they're in anguish, and the psychiatrist immediately prescribes a psych drug for them to give them relief. So all the psych drugs are going to do, remember, is to dampen down their affect. So they still feel like shit, but now they're apathetic about it. Like, okay, so this feels better, right? I feel better because I don't feel so bad, because I don't care that I am unconnected to other people, that I'm lonely, that I'm fearful, that I'm distrustful, that I'm anxious. You haven't gotten rid of any of those feelings. You've just, tamped them down to the point where now you can't access them and there's nothing you can do about them. So if a psychiatrist does that, Peter Breggin says, how is that different from, I go to a bar and I see a beautiful woman sitting at the bar and I want her to have sex with me. And so I try conversation and it doesn't go anywhere. She ignores me. I ask her for her phone number. She doesn't give me her phone number. I'm unable to forge a genuine human connection with this woman. So I slip a roofie in her drink. He says that's what psychiatry is. It's because we don't know how to connect with people. We're not taught how to be therapists. We're not taught how to be caring, loving, supportive human beings. We're slipping roofies in their drinks, and then we're conducting that relationship under that power differential. And because we have the power to drug them, we have the power to put them in psychiatric institutions. So that was really powerful to me. And those were the first two talks of the Wellness Forum conference. We also had a talk from Janice Stanger about diet and pregnancy. And if you listen to the Plant Yourself podcast, I will get her to be a guest on the podcast and talk about diet and pregnancy, because it was an amazing talk.
Tell them how to listen.
PlantYourself.com. You can just go there, and it won't be up for a while now, but if you go to PlantYourself.com, give me your email. Give me your name and email address, and I send out emails with new shows, and you'll be able to to know. Also, a talk by Thomas Seyfried on cancer as a metabolic disease. And I did do a Plant Yourself podcast on this issue, not with Tom Seyfried, but with Pam Popper, who is the founder and director of Wellness Forum Health, on what she found interesting about his work. And you can find that if you go to plantyourself.com and you just search for Pam Popper. I think she's been on 3 or 4 times now, but the most recent, this would have been October, late October 2016. You'll find her interview talking about cancer as a metabolic disease. Then a talk by Mary L. Von Lanthen, a gastroenterologist, on reflux and how reflux is caused, diagnosed, treated in the mainstream, and treated through diet. And T. Colin Campbell spoke about, my co-author, spoke about the 30,000-foot view of nutrition and why nutrition is ignored in medical schools, why it's ignored in medical practice, why it's ignored in the National Institutes of Health, why there's no insurance code for nutritional therapies, and what needs to change. And then Peter Breggin ended the conference by talking about how to be therapeutic. And at some point, I'm hoping to get him on the podcast to explore these beautiful ideas. As I left, I picked up a book and had him autograph it. The book was called Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety, Recognizing and Overcoming Negative Emotions, something like that. And it has a theory about guilt, shame, and anxiety that I found absolutely fascinating and very empowering, and I'm sure I'll be sharing that at some point. So before I go, as you might know, I'm working on a book with Josh LaJaunie, who is the 420-pound college dropout from Louisiana who has become a plant-based ultra athlete, graduate of university, business owner, one of my great mentors and guides. We're working on a book together this week, in fact. If you go to your store that sells magazines, you will see him on the cover of Runner's World. He won the 2016 Cover Search competition as a kind of regular, real runner who had the most inspiring breakthrough story. And he and I are working on a book, and based on the fact that he won this Runner's World competition, we want to speed it up and really get it out there. So I'm going to be going full throttle for the next month or so working on this book. So I'm taking a break from the Tribe of Well TV. Plan on coming back, and so if you're missing me, here's a couple ways to stay in touch. You can get the Plant Yourself podcast, which is still going to be coming out once a week on Tuesdays when I manage it, and that's at plantyourself.com. Also, if you write to me, hj@plantyourself.com, I'm offering a free month in the Tribe of Well, and we have it's a $600 a year service that involves 3 healthy habit huddles a month, where we talk about health, do coaching, I help people with issues, I share, go into much greater depth some of the topics we talk about here, and you can get your free month. Just write to me and let me know you want that, and I'll send you a link to sign up. And finally, I'll ask you this: have you, if you're not in great shape, if you're not at the weight you want to be, and you're on meds, and you're having trouble kind of sticking to a diet and exercise and lifestyle plan, let me ask you this: have you given up on getting to your lean ideal weight, getting off your meds, and being full of energy and pain-free? So if you haven't given up, then I'd like you to check out the Big Change program. Josh and I run this together. We're starting a new run in January, and within a week or two, registration will be open, and you'll be able to find that at bigchangeprogram.com. And if you go there and there's no sign-up button, then we're not ready to open the doors yet. With Josh's newfound fame on the cover search, we're expecting it will sell out very quickly. We're limiting it to 60 participants, so everybody gets personal attention, and that will open up sometime before Thanksgiving. So those are ways to stay in touch with me. There's also like 30 or 35 episodes of Triangle Be Well TV that you can catch. So I'm not going anywhere, and I will be back. And so thank you, Amnon, for all your guidance and support and help.
Thank you.
And thanks for the water.
Anytime.
And for all the pizza imagery that we conjured up today. By the way, there's lots of great pizzas you can make without dairy, without cheese. Right. So you can still do your porno fantasies in a cruelty-free way. All right, and that's it for me. So as always, be well, my friends.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of